weathered the storm, and you're here. And I always find that, it's when we go through some challenges and obstacles that God meets us. I know a lot of us want to meet God, and God is not in the. I was reading just last night, actually, and it was the story of Jesus calling the disciples for the first time, Peter, James, and Andrew and the crew. And they were just fishing, and they'd been fishing all night. And it says that they toiled, and they caught nothing. And so Jesus shows up, and he says, "Hey, Peter, can I borrow your boat?" And Peter's like, "Yeah, I guess. You're Jesus." Yeah, so Jesus takes his boat and preaches. And then after he's done his sermon, he looks to Peter and he says, "Hey, Peter, why don't you go out to the deep and fish?" And Peter says, "You don't understand, Jesus. We've been fishing all night, caught nothing." Peter was basically telling Jesus, "Listen, I've tried everything, and based on my capacity and ability, there is no fish. I'm an expert fisherman. I've been doing this a long time. I'm not going to go out to the deep." He was tired. He was exhausted. It's funny how God sometimes calls us to do something in the midst of tremendous struggle and challenge when we're ready to give up. And he says, "Hey, why don't you try one more time?" But this time, Jesus is on his boat. See, this is the difference. Jesus is on the boat this time. And so what Peter says is, "Okay, I guess, yeah, you're the Messiah, so I'll listen." So they go out to the deep, and guess what? They catch so much fish that their boat is not big enough. And so they have to call their friends, the other fishermen. And the lesson I learned in that is that when we get off the what I call the shore of comfort, because that's where Peter was fishing, and go out to the deep, where it's scary, we end up having a great catch. But it's not just for us. So you don't go out to the deep just for you. You don't realize this, but when you're out there doing the things that you're doing, when you're starting a business, when you're going for school, and when you're like 40 years old and you're thinking, "What am I doing?" When you decide to do a career change, whatever it may be, when you're going out to the, to the deep, when you're going for it, it's not just for yourself. You're doing it for others too. So your blessing is other people's blessing, and that's God's heart, is that he really wants to bless us so that we can be, oh my gosh, oh my goodness. This is me in my own little world. That God would want us to be a blessing for others. And so I just want to give you a little encouragement today, is that if you're feeling really challenged and you're feeling really tired and you've been toiling, maybe not all night, maybe it's been all week, maybe it's been all month, maybe it's been all year, and you're ready to give up, just let Jesus on your boat. But the joy of having Jesus on your boat is not so that you can live a comfortable life, it's so that you can go out to the deep. And that is the journey of the Christian faith that we have. God's calling us all out to go to the deep. I've been thinking about that a lot. Like every morning I wake up, and guess what I want? I want comfort. I want to go where I am comfortable, where I'm in control. And God is like, "No, I want you to go to a place where I'm in control." And that's the step of faith, and it's scary. But guess what happens is that you not only really get to see the goodness of God, because that's what happened to Peter. See, at the time that Peter ended up going fishing out in the deep, he wasn't really a Christian. He didn't know God. It was in that moment where he's like, "Oh my gosh, guys, who's this guy?" And that's when he confessed. He's like, "I'm not good enough to be in front of you." He saw the goodness of God, and the goodness of God is what leads us to repentance. And that's what I really want to talk to you guys a little bit about today is Pastor John did an incredible job last week talking about Ephesians 3 and talking about the prayer that Paul prayed. And And what I want to do is just kind of take one aspect of what Pastor John really focused on, which is really about God, Paul's prayer for us. And one of the prayers that I really loved was in Ephesians 3:16-19. And this is what he says, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner man, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth, and to know the love of Christ which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up to the fullness of God. That is the ultimate prayer, that we would know the love of God. Because the love of God is a boundary that sets us free. When Paul talks about being rooted and grounded in love, what he's saying is that he wants us to be established. Our foundation for everything that needs to be must come from our love relationship with God. Unless we know that we're loved by God, whatever we build will fall apart. Whatever boundaries we put over our lives will never be good enough. Whatever guardrails, because guess what they become? They actually become prison. Men-made rules without love only end up killing you. And a lot of us, that's what we do. I've done it. We read all these personal development books and we do all this thing and we think that's what we need to get to where we need to. But what we need is actually to be established and grounded in love. To know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge. You understand? The love of God surpasses knowledge. Our understanding, our capacity to comprehend. The love of Christ is so inconceivably big and massive that we can't even comprehend it. No amount of our intellectual capacity can understand the love of God. None of us can understand why God would come down from heaven and hang on a cross for humanity. That he would bear the sin of the world. That makes no sense. I can't comprehend it. But that's what love does. And what I want to do today is just really concentrate and focus on the idea that love, there's so many aspects to love. There's so many different aspects of love. And Pastor John talked about the three levels of love. There's the philios, and then there's the agape, and then there's the eros, these are all different types of love. But the highest form of love is agape, which is the unconditional love of God. When you love somebody unconditionally, that means you have zero expectation that love will actually be returned. But you love. And so one of the things I want to do today is just focus on one aspect of it, which is more about this idea that love can actually be this incredible boundary that sets us free. We all need boundaries to live effective lives. And I'm realizing the importance of boundaries. According to Webster's dictionary, it's something that indicates bounds or limits. We all need boundaries and limits in our lives. I know I need it. I know when I was living that drug-infused lifestyle, there were no limits. There were no boundaries in my life. And a man and a woman that does not have limits or boundaries is incredibly dangerous. By definition, having a boundary is not a negative. I think many of us see that as a negative. We all want to, I want to color outside the lines and I want to do all this stuff, which is great. But when it comes to life, we all need boundaries. It's not negative, but part of existing. It's what identifies who we are. Did you know that? We're not who we are and what you're not, essentially. If you don't know who you are, then it will be next to impossible to actually assert boundaries in your life. Identity is so essential to boundaries. Boundaries only define what already exists. You can't just simply build fences around your life and call it a boundary. I think the mistake I know many of us make is trying to establish guidelines and rules and limits without first establishing our identity in Christ, without first being rooted and established in love. Because otherwise, what it becomes is we just basically are closing ourselves from an opportunity to actually live life. C.S. Lewis, which is a great Christian writer, talks about this. You know, when many of us get hurt, when we love and we get hurt, what do? We say to ourselves, you know what, from this day forward, I'm going to take my love and I'm going to put it in this chest and lock it up. And we think that's a healthy boundary. And we see so many people living lives that way. Guess what? That's not how God intended for us. That's a self-imposed prison. Boundaries simply state who we are emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Am I saying you don't need to set guidelines, rules, and limits in your life? No way. You do. Absolutely not. We all need to identify who we are. And we also need to understand what is reasonable, and so that when people encroach on our boundaries, we have a clear set of guidelines, but it's established from a place of being rooted and established in Christ. And one of the examples I was thinking about is 9/11. How many were around during 9/11? I remember that day like it was yesterday because I was in my buddy's car, and I was actually going to pick him up because I had his car overnight. And as we were driving, I was listening to the sports station because that's all I did, the 1200. And all of a sudden, I can hear these guys who always talked about silly things, nothing, talking about these Twin Towers coming down. I didn't believe it. I thought it was just a complete joke because that's what they were known for. They were always doing crazy things. So I kept driving, and then all of a sudden, they cut back to CNN, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. And my buddy gets in the car, and I said, can you believe this? The Twin Towers are down. And in that day, the world changed as we know it. And one of the things that happened was, it's a paradox, because in the United States, what happened was there was a sense that they needed to establish security. And the security was established because it was motivated, out of fear. It was a reaction to something that had happened. So immediately, America started to think that they needed to build this massive fence around their country so that they could be protected. And I was thinking about that recently, and I was saying to myself, there's a paradox to it, because when we set boundaries of our lives out of fear, what it does is actually it imprisons us. And it also, what it does is it demands more security. It's never enough. Because this is now, that's what fear does, is that when we do things out of a place of fear, it's never enough. We have to constantly build higher walls and bigger this and bigger that, because it's man-made. It comes from a place of fear, and that's what fear does. But when we set a boundary over our lives because of love, it frees us. It's a paradox. Because the natural disposition is to build walls of our lives. You get hurt, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to build walls over your life and protect yourself. But God says something crazy. It says, love your enemies. Why is that? Because God knows and understands something powerful about love, that when we love, we're actually free. That when we love, we are actually protected. That love sets a boundary of our lives that no amount of rules and any of that stuff can actually help. It can't set those limits. So the more security you're given sometimes in our life, the more security we demand. And you think about this, how many years are we separated from 9/11? And yet it is it's that one moment that has changed the way we do everything. Look at the airports. Look wherever you go. That one incident has changed literally how we in the Western society live our lives. And every attack, we build more walls. More walls. And I thought about this. Isn't this how we are as individuals? Every time we're hurt, we build more walls, more walls, more walls. And that's why Life Lab is such an incredible program, because what it does is it helps us see the walls that we've built, these unhealthy boundaries that we put in our lives, so that we can trust again. Am I saying that because you love, you're never going to get hurt again? Of course you will. But when you're grounded and established in the love of God, guess what happens? It doesn't take you out. It doesn't take you out. So when someone leaves you, or if your marriage doesn't go the way it's supposed to be because one of the individuals in the marriage decided to, not go by the vow that they made, it doesn't destroy you. It doesn't make you assassinate the character of God. So one thing that I want you to understand today is that anything that is motivated by fear confines, and anything that is motivated by love frees. The Bible tells us that perfect love casts out all fear. The question I want to ask you this morning is, are your boundaries established in love or in fear? Because the law, when it's established from fear, remember this, the cousin of fear is the law. Isn't that interesting? The law, by its nature, what does it do? It produces fear. The law consistently will put a demand, and it's never satisfied. So that means is you're always needing to build external boundaries. But what God wants you to do is have an internal boundary. That's the prayer. Do you know what Paul's praying? That we would be established in love in the inner man. On the inside, not on the outside. Which is so powerful. That's the kind of boundary that will change our lives, that will make us incredibly impactful. Because it will never be dependent on external circumstances. And this is why Christ can just love in spite of all the accusations and the lies, because he was established in love in the inner man. When Christ actually is established in ministry, you read this in Matthew 4, the first thing that happens to him is this, is that he is baptized by John the Baptist. And when he's baptized, he gets affirmed by his Father in heaven that he is his son. Until you're established as a son and as a daughter, you will never be effective in anything that you do. I am an example of that. I am an example of a person who has never had really a real revelation of what it meant to be a son. And a lot of it has to do with my testimonies, you guys know, and the external circumstances. When you don't have a father and you live in a war-torn country where people are dying left and right, and you're a child, you're defined by that, and so you carry this orphan spirit wherever you go. And so the only way you can heal that is there's got to be an exchange that takes place somewhere along the way, where you finally look to the Father, not to men, to be established in love. Because men will never be able to establish you and ground you in love. We are not capable. Doesn't matter how badly I want to love you, I just don't have the kind of love that will establish you and ground you. And so we have to go to our Heavenly Father and ask Him. And when we hear from Him, John's testimony is really that, isn't it? It's a testimony of him finally being affirmed by the Heavenly Father that he's not an orphan, but that he is a son. And guess what happens then when we're established and grounded in love? This is the cool part, is that his love will naturally produce a healthy boundary. Do you want a healthy boundary in your life? Do you feel like you have no boundaries right now? We all do. But healthy boundaries established when we know God's love. Paul in Corinthians 2:5-17 says, "For the love of Christ controls us, for one died and all have died." I love this word. Yes, love not only controls us, but it also directs us. The word control here can also be translated to mean constrains. The love of God constrains us. That's what boundaries do. It sets limits of our lives. The Greek word is synko, which means to hold together, to compress on every side, to hold completely of a strait that forces a ship into a narrow channel. What the love of God does is this, is that it takes a life where you've seen a person who has no boundaries. They're just like everywhere. This is my headset. I've been playing with it, and where is it? Oh! My ears are not big enough for something. I don't know what's going on. But have you ever... My tray? Yeah, there you go. Have you ever met, though, a person who has no boundaries? They're not a fun people to be around with. There's no limits to the madness. But all of a sudden, when you experience the love of God, it starts to focus your life like a channel, like a ship, coming out of the ocean. And it starts to channel and gives our life focus and purpose. It forces us to focus our lives. Meaning when you receive his love, you find purpose in life. And in it, you are protected. Isn't that incredible? Yeah, I see it. I don't know what to do. There we go. Today's my day. Like last week was Pastor John's day, and now I'm doing my thing. You know what? That's the beauty of God. Is I was thinking about this earlier too. I love the fact that nothing is perfect. I love this church. One thing I know about this church, I've come from a place of performance, and everything has to be perfect. And I'm always amazed that I can walk in here and feel like, I'm received and accepted just as I am. And I don't have to have it all together. And, I feel your love. And that's why I feel comfortable. Some other places, you're like, oh, no, I screwed up. I'm not even going to think about this when I go home. So what I want to tell you really is this, is that boundaries have to be established from the inside out, not from outside in. That's the key. And because then what love does, and this is the beauty, this is another aspect of love, is that it gives us the freedom to choose. One of the things that I love about this country is that we have the freedom to choose. And really much of this country, it was established on biblical principles. And the idea is that we have the ability to choose whether we want to be loved or not loved. And that is the beauty of it, is that the love can be rejected. It gives you the opportunity to take love and abuse it. But that's what freedom does. God, in Galatians 5:1 says, it was for freedom that Christ set us free. Meaning love is given freely, puts no demands on us, and does not force anything on us. We can accept it or reject it. And I love that fact. Because the thing about love is it draws us in. When you experience love, and sometimes because of our experiences, it may take longer for a certain individual. And for some, it might just be that one moment. We never know. The point is that we have to continue to receive love. And eventually, sooner or later, love will win. The prodigal son had the story. How many know the story of the prodigal son? Imagine he had the freedom to choose. The younger son, the black sheep of the family, the guy who came to his father and said, hey, I want my inheritance now. And the father said, okay, you want your inheritance now? Reluctantly gives it to him because that's what love does. Knowing fully well probably that this child is not capable of really stewarding that inheritance, but he still gives it to him. And he goes and he just abuses that inheritance to the point where he loses everything and he finds himself sleeping with the pigs, the lowest place that he can ever be. And in that moment, he comes to his senses and he says to himself, I might be better off as a slave in my father's house. He's not even thinking that his father will accept him as a son again. He just wants to be received as a slave. And the beauty of this is that the prodigal son came back having pushed all boundaries aside. He really was the guy who explored and colored outside the lines. His identity was really defined in being the black sheep of the family. And then there was the older brother who didn't leave home. He was the one that probably everybody in the community looked up to and says, oh, look at him. Goes to church every Sunday. he's always working and doing everything that his father's asked of him. What an incredible, wonderful child. And probably many said to the other younger son, can't you be a little bit more like your older brother? Can you be a little bit more responsible? But what you learn is that their identities were really weird because they were both slaves. One's identity was established in him being the bad boy. That was his identity. He wore it with a badge of honor. And the other one was all based on performance. Do you know how I know this? Let's read the passage, because that passage really helps us really see what, sorry, I'm having like massive issues here. Luke 15, 28, 30 says, the older brother stalked off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. Then the son said, look how many years I've stayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief, but have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? Then this son of yours who has thrown away your money on whores shows up and you go all out with a feast. How many of us have worn the hat of the older brother? The slave mentality. Where we're like, look at this guy. He doesn't deserve it. Yet the father's like, this is my son that was lost but is now found. Love never gives up. It never gave up. But the beauty of it is not only does it never give up, but it establishes us in our right standing with God, even when we screw up on purpose. Which is strange because really the younger son screwed up on purpose. Come on. He took the wealth. This was not an accident. He thought he could do better with the money. He thought he could do better without his father's protection, without the boundaries set over his life. And yet the father accepts him and receives him. And the older son sadly had a slave mentality because he, even though was living in his father's house, he did not see that boundary to be freedom. He didn't know his freedom in Christ. And so many of us sometimes live these perfect lives. We're in the church and we have these amazing testimony that we never, went off the deep end. And when we see someone who's been doing crack and all this stuff comes to the church and they're being received and we're like, they don't deserve it. We judge them. Because the reason being is because we're not rooted and established in love. So what I'm learning is that it doesn't matter whether or not you're in the house with your father hanging out every day or you're out there sleeping with the whores. All of us have to be established and rooted in the love of God, or otherwise we're completely, utterly lost and we're just a slave. I always wondered, a question I asked myself is that older brother, did he ever actually enjoy the inheritance that he had? Because all he was about was performance. And he became utterly bitter and angry. He's like, I've been serving you all these years and I've never caused you any problems. And what have you done for me? And the father says to him, don't you realize that everything that's here is yours? And what I want to tell you guys is this, is that so many of us have the salvation experience with God, and we come into this relationship, but we never enjoy the benefits of our relationship with God. How many of us live that way? Living dangerously. Eventually this laptop will fall and y'all are going to have to pay for me. I'm going to hold it. How about this? Your laptop, that's the title of the sermon. How many of us don't recognize our sonship, our relationship that we have? I'm one of those individuals. And we live in slavery. And I'll tell you this, a lot of the sin issues that we all deal with is really an identity issue. It's when we don't know who we are, then we try to find some other love. But this is a counterfeit love that doesn't ground us, doesn't establish us, but puts a demand on us. And the devil will always lie to us. He'll always make it look like it's freedom, but in reality, it's actually prison. He's setting us up. And that's what happened to the younger son. He thought that he could do it better outside of the father's boundary, but he ended up actually in prison. And so my encouragement to you guys today is this, is that I know for me anyways, is after reading that passage and reading the story of the prodigal son, that doesn't matter where you are, you can always just approach the Father. He loves you. It doesn't matter how miserably you failed. Don't disqualify yourself from a relationship with God. He loves us all the time, not only when we're performing. And his love never changes, even when we miss the mark, even when we intentionally miss the mark. And I really believe love has the capacity to transform us in the same way it transformed the prodigal son. It's not external stuff. I know sometimes we put so much ownership on discipline and all this other stuff, even all the other stuff that we read in Scripture, whether it's fasting or confession, all those things. If they're not coming from the inside out and they're all externally motivated, it's just religion. It'll never bring us freedom. It'll just make it miserable. We'll be running around chanting these crazy chants, hoping that somehow that chant is going to be the thing that's going to... No, it's the love of God that establishes us. And so until you're established on the inside, you will really never fully feel loved, no matter where you go. And this is what I see with so many people, is because they think that it's externally. This church didn't love me. This person didn't love me. And they go from place to place looking for love, when that love really can only be on the inside. And so my prayer today, in the same way that Paul prayed, is that we would be grounded and rooted, established in Christ's love. And so my hope for all of us today is it's not about more discussions. It's not about programs. It's really about us really, truly receiving the love of God. And I want to tell you this, love never, ever places a demand on you. Did you know that? It's radical. It always places it on the giver. He's the one who gives. It's so amazing how Christ puts it all on himself. And he's the giver of love. And so sometimes when you feel like you don't have enough love to give, and you're like, man, it's his love. When somebody says to you, hey, you don't understand my issues, and you're like, yeah, I can't comprehend it, but he does. And I really love what Pastor John really talked about, is at the end of the day, it's not about man, it's about God. And my hope today for you is this, is that you understand that the love of God can set a boundary over your life that focuses you, that gives you purpose and establishes you in an incredibly powerful way. I have one little question for you guys and something. If you go to the last slide, which son do you identify with, the younger brother or the older brother? If you have some time, we can do a little discussion if you feel like it. If not, it's okay. I know we're a little late, but I just want to say thank you, and I want to pray for you guys that you would be established and rooted in God's love. God, I just thank you for today. Thank you for your love. Thank you that it establishes us and it sets a foundation over our lives. And I pray that as we move forward in this new year, that we wouldn't look for external boundaries, that we wouldn't look for external things, but that we would look on the inner man, and that we would be established in our identity in you. And I pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, guys.